Finance Minister today says subsidy will stop in June this year. We dissect the last budget of the Buhari administration and its effect on citizens. And INEC is getting set for the next month general election as a commission today welcomes the arrival of the last consignment of the Biomodal Voter Accreditation System, BVAS. Hello everyone, welcome to this media edition of Politics Today live on Channels Television. It's your fourth day of the year 2023. I'm sure Kimale in Abuja. Our eyes are still on the 2023 elections, and it's 52 days to the polls where Nigerians are anticipating the opportunity to elect their leaders in the February next year election. 51 days rather, and we're counting. Nigeria decides, get your PVC and make your vote count. It does look to me that things are looking really set ahead of the 2023 elections. Today, INEC received the consignment of the Biomodal Voter Accreditation BVAS machines. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, and some senior officers of the commission were at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, to receive the BVAS to facilitate the smooth delivery of the machines. The commission created 4 airport hubs in Abuja, Kano, Lagos, and Port Harcourt over the last 4 months, where several flights delivered the BVAS to the designated airports for movement to the states, different states of the Federation ahead of the elections. Well, with this strategy of aiding an easy and smooth delivery, it does look now that with the arrival of the last flight in Abuja yesterday, the commission has now taken delivery of the required number of the BVAS that will be sufficient for all the polling units in the country, and extra also machines in line with the contingency plans for all the critical election materials needed for the elections. So as INEC is preparing, I hope you are also preparing. If you don't have your permanent voter card, you are wrong, just like they told us when we are in the NYC camp. So what you need to do to be right is to go and find the local government area where you can get your permanent voter card, collect your permanent voter card, and ensure that you use it on election day. I guess that we end on the 15th of January. So the days are running so fast. So you have just about 12 days or so to the end of the collection. So you need to get things done and get your own part as a citizen done. So much to talk about tonight. We'll be dissecting the very last budget of the Buhari administration, the subsidy regime, the performance of the Buhari government, what this year have in store for Nigerians. We'll be looking at several issues. Mr. Femi Adesina will be joining me. Professor Utomi is also on the bill tonight. So stay with me, everyone. But first and foremost, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
The presidential candidate of the New Nigeria People's Party, Mr. Rabiu Kwankwaso, says it's wrong for any individual to endorse candidates ahead of the general elections, no matter the status of such a person in the society. Mr. Kwankwaso stated this in Benin City after paying a courtesy call on the governor of Edo State ahead of his presidential campaign flag-off in the state.
I can tell you nothing will change whether somebody endorses from the north or from the south or from outside the country. It doesn't matter. And I want to advise our leaders, please, if you see them, you tell them. that they should not stop disgracing themselves. We have so much respect for them.
The governors of Bayelsa and Edo states have paid a solidarity visit to their Delta State counterparts and the PDP vice presidential candidates, appealing to the G5 governors to sheathe their swords and work for the victory of the party at the polls. The governors were in Owa Alero, home of their Delta counterpart in Ikan Northeast Council, to also facilitate with him on the new year.
We are still calling on our brothers to be part of their own party and work in unity with every other person.
PDP members across other states have staged a rally to show their support for the presidential flag bearer of the party, Atiku Abubakar, who they've described as the only candidate capable of re-energizing Nigeria. The members, led by some leaders of the party, went through the streets of the state capital where they addressed the waiting crowd.
And I want to say that Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is the best president for Nigeria. He is a unifier. He is an economic guru. He is a lover of every Nigerian.
Ahead of the campaign visit of the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, to Yobe, over 180 groups under the auspices of the Grassroots Independent Campaign Council are pledging their support for the Tinubu Kashim Shettima ticket in the state. The groups who marched through the major streets of Damaturu, the state capital, stopped at Government House Damaturu and were received by the Deputy Governor, Mr. Idi Barde Gubana, where he promised massive votes for the APC candidates.
So we are assuring Mr. President and his Vice President, who is also a Yobian, that we are delivering 99%.
The women wing of the presidential campaign team of the All Progressives Congress, APC, has donated relief items to some vulnerable persons in Taraba State. The Director General of the National Center for Women Development, Mrs. Asabe Bashir, represented the wives of the president, the APC presidential candidate, and the running mate. According to Mrs. Bashir, the humanitarian service is to cushion the economic hardship on the residents as well as give them a sense of belonging.
All right, then you've been served with your political roundup stories. Part of the stories that we're hoping to tell you tonight is that the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission has all it cleared today after a judgment of the Federal Capital Territory High Court in Garete cancelled the allegations of false asset declaration against the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. The court also barred the Department of State Security, the police, and the Code of Conduct Bureau from investigating him over his valid asset declaration. It was an originating summons that was filed by Samadina Uzoabaka against the Attorney General of the Federation and Professor Yakubu, that the claimant sought, among other things, an order of a mandatory injunction directing and compelling the INEC chairman to step down as the chairman of INEC pending the investigation and consideration of the various allegations against him by the various law enforcement agencies. So the judge declined to grant any of the 14 prayers of the claimant and declared that the INEC chairman cannot be removed over fabricated allegations of false asset declaration. The judge therefore dismissed the claims of the claimant and allowed the counterclaim of the INEC chairman. Justice Hassan was delivering the judgment and found that the declaration of asset by Professor Yakubu was lawful, valid, and in compliance with the law, and that it cannot be investigated by any of the security agencies listed by the claimant. All right, then our major focus tonight will be the very final budget of the Buhari administration, what this means. When people are talking about budget, a lot of Nigerians may not even understand that this is the template in which the affairs of government the affairs of government will be run, and also and how the lives and livelihood of an average Nigerians also will look like. It is somewhat a prediction or a projection of the spending, the expenditure, and also the income that the government is expecting in its purse to be able to steer the affairs of the nation. So the Buhari administration has seen its last budget passed, and the budget totaled over 21 trillion naira, and more explanations were being made today by the Minister of Finance on the budget and its intent. The federal government says that it will stop the payment of fuel subsidy by the end of June 2023. And the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, disclosed this during the public presentation of the 2023 government budget. And Mrs. Zainab disclosed that in the 2023 fiscal period, the government has made provisions of 3.36 trillion naira for fuel subsidy payment to cover the first 6 months of this year. She says that this is in line with the 18-month extension announced in early 2022.
From the projected fiscal outcomes in the 2023 budget is based on petroleum subsidy reform ratio. And that is to say, in the 2023 framework, we had assumed, and the National Assembly had approved, that the petroleum subsidy will remain up to the middle of 2023, based on the 18 months extension announced early in 2022. In this regard, only 3.36 trillion has been provided for PMS subsidy in the 2023 budget. There will also be tighter enforcement of the performance management framework for government-owned enterprises that will result in further increase in operating surpluses and dividend remittances in 2023. The monitoring that we have been doing has been yielding results, as you have seen earlier in the performance of the independent revenues of 2022.
As the Minister of Finance, let's make a sense of what this budget means, because like I said, that budget is the template in which the government will run the affairs of the nation. This is a very final one, the 8th budget of the Buhari administration. I'm being joined by Professor of Political Economics, Professor Utomi, and one of the leaders of the Big Ten. Thank you so much, Prof, for coming tonight.
Great pleasure.
Not so much time we have on our hands, but look, budget is very important in the lives of, this is basically a picture. You take a picture, it's the way you look in the picture that, that you can deceive yourself. The picture is perhaps, or the budget of Nigeria is perhaps the way Nigeria is presently, has been projected by the government. This is the last budget of the Buhari administration. What, in your own view, does this budget hope to achieve, or what do you see in this budget generally? I know you are not a fan of the budget of Nigeria.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up quickly.
I'm trying to ask you about budgets.
I've avoided talking about budgets in Nigeria.
Annoy you.
They annoy me. Because, look at what we have just heard today. What is the goal of the Buhari administration? It says it wants to create 10 million jobs in, 10 years or something?
Yeah.
This budget will create one job? No.
100 million jobs in 10 years.
This will lead to loss of jobs. It will lead to massive inflation. It will lead to a collapse of the exchange rate. Let me explain why. It's very simple. This is a budget of debt service. Okay? You're going to have revenues of what? 9 trillion?
Mm-hmm.
You're projecting expenditure of what? 21 trillion?
Yeah.
You're already in an unsustainable debt situation. Tell me anybody who understands economics what this means. This is going to mean serious inflation. Okay? This is going to mean, if you were in a situation where people are rushing to invest in Nigeria, you would say, okay, revenues that flow in would accelerate production. And when you ask people who manage the economy, they say to you, you see, the problem is not that our debt situation is unsustainable. The problem is out of collecting revenues. There's revenue problem. Look, there's a gentleman called Arthur Laffer. Arthur Laffer, the professor at USC when Reagan became president of the United States. His thesis, supply-side economics, became the mantra of that era. Interestingly, and we forget this, that's the problem of Nigeria, because Nigeria has fine minds that Nigeria refuses to get to apply. The equation that cracked the problem for Arthur Laffer, at Lafayette, and led to the so-called Laffer curve about optimal tax rates. It was cracked by a Nigerian student of his, Omoche Odogu, back in the 70s. And that thesis essentially says to you, there's an optimal rate of trying to collect taxes and people don't invest. Nigeria already suffers from a problem where in 2019, I think it was May 28th article of Forbes magazine, Nigeria was described as Africa's money-losing machine. Africa's money-losing machine. Typically, nobody wanted to go to Nigeria to invest. Money has been leaving Nigeria rather than coming in. So, are you going to get new money coming? When India got into the unsustainable kind of situation with just 3 weeks' money in its reserves in 1991, what happened? A sea change of policies with Manmohan Singh led to new flood of investments. That's not quite happening yet in Nigeria.
Prof, merging history and political economics and all of these manner in which government have been drawn over the last 20 years or so, when we know that there is a way that things have gone, can you blame the Buhari government for the economic woes we're facing presently?
Yeah, absolutely, I can blame the Buhari government.
That whatever they've done in the last 8 years has not worked?
Absolutely. Let me tell you why I will. The biggest challenge in the Nigerian economy is ways and means advances from Central Bank of Nigeria. At this point, it is 1,900 or 2,900% in printed money from the central bank without equivalent value.
Is it correct to say they've been printing money out
absolutely.
of the usual?
Our Fiscal Responsibility Act makes it an offense to do what has been done.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Just apologies to because I've heard a lot of debate about the issue of printing money. When Governor Obaseki mentioned this, a lot of people criticize him. That saying that government was printing or CBN was printing money in a manner that was unusual was wrong. But if you as notable as you are in your field, you're repeating that.
Obaseki was not wrong.
And I hope that you're not saying this because you are in the opposition.
Hey, look, come on. We have one country. Doesn't matter what flag you fly, it is Nigeria. And we want to build a country for our children. I am one of those who say that opposition leaders, when they say things that lead to a run on the economy, do grave damage to themselves. There is a certain parameter that we must stay within. But we have to stop. The problem I have is with the civil service. And this is why we started with a program on how to rebuild the civil service. A civil service that knows what it's doing will not allow the kind of budget that was read to be read. Because you see, when General Govt reached an accord in Aburi and came back, the quality of the civil service of that time said to him, you're the political leader. That was a wrong move for Nigeria. Civil servants who know if they do know, and there's a capacity problem today in the civil service. And our first job, anybody who wants to fix the country, to begin to fix the civil service. Says to them, don't read this kind of budget. When we started out in this administration, nobody was managing fiscal policy. That's the truth of the matter. Central bank suddenly went from managing monetary policy to managing both monetary policy and fiscal policy. And it went overboard. In the process, it could not now tell its own limits. And ways and means advances in the name of shoring up economic activity became just a routine, violating fiscal responsibility laws. And this is payback time, unfortunately, for the economy. But thank God that we have the example of India to show that it's possible to stop this. But the first thing is that the international community have to see managers that they can trust at the helm. Once they see managers they can trust at the helm, there are things that can happen that will lead to a checking of the slide.
Prof, two things that we need to clear.
Yes.
And I'd like you to help me hit it on the nail and let Nigerians get the perspective. My viewers are not the usual figure of view. I mean, they like to listen to politics. That's why they tune in. Now, ways and means, you mentioned something that was critical, which the National Assembly members disagree on the floor about. They said, look, these monies have also been spent anyways, but there isn't anything wrong with ways and means, is it?
It depends on the extent to which you do it, because it has consequence.
So what was wrong with this one?
Now, if you continue to generate or to create money without creating value, the consequence is inflation. And exchange rate will be collapsing, and you just multiply. I can tell you, God forbid, if we don't do something dramatic, the effect of this budget is that exchange rate will go past 1,000. That is a direct effect of this budget. You are going to see inflation probably go up to 50% from what was read today, if some new dramatic things were not made. Because if we had a rush of investments, local and foreign, it would be an interesting thing, because the money is coming in would lead to investments that will create new value that can lead to both exports and a new set of jobs being created. But we're still in a net loss situation. Money is still leaving Nigeria because of lack of trust of the management of the economy. So if you're in that kind of position, this is tragic. If you're in a position where people will say, okay, it's time for a rebirth in Nigeria. I'll give you an example. In 1998, I was involved in a advisory dialogue with General Obasanjo, who was then running for president. And I said, look, we need to essentially increase wages of civil servants significantly if we have to create money to do that. Because as we do that, and they begin to consume, Liver Brothers will spend billions investing in new factories, because if we did a standard gauge railway from Lagos to through Abuja to Kano to Calabar, all of the money that they are earning, even if you are, will lead them to purchases that will lead to new investment that will generate. We had a big debate around that. Where we are today, all the money that has been created has created little value in the Nigerian economy. We've serviced debt, and we've done the kind of projects that have put money in the pocket of a few people. That's state capture, so for you. And those people have spent the money in a way that has not led to economic growth.
So, I mean, we have some eggheads in the Buhari cabinet, isn't it? You have said the economy has been badly managed. You don't agree?
Let them come out and let's debate.
No, you don't agree that there are eggheads managing the economy?
It's not a matter of whether you have an egg on your head, but the logic of your position.
Do you fault the managers of this economy?
The outcome, the consequences are fundamentally flawed.
In one phrase or one sentence, how would you describe the management of the economy under Buhari government?
You cannot use one sentence to discuss the management.
No, to describe.
Describe.
Yeah, I mean, you can describe in one word, in one phrase, or in one sentence.
People friendly, not job creation sensitive, not economic growth oriented.
What would you say is the cause? You alluded to this CBN being overboard the other time.
Because we're in the politics of prebendal sharing. Take your share, take this person, go and buy private jet, this. Make sacrifice, you bring momentum of expenditure to a halt and go into productive activities. And then you can tax people down the line.
If I ask you, Prof, there are fundamental things that this government have done, that put their hands into.
I'm not denying that there are fundamental things that have been done.
And what they are fundamental, whether they are negative or positive, but there are projects that this government have done. We've seen rails that this government have done. We've seen the second Niger bridge that this government have done. They've done. I mean, there are things that I understand that are going on within the power sector.
Sure.
In fact, just remember, if I may land quickly, where do you think, in your own mind, that this government got it wrong, if they are wrong?
Shimon, there are projects that you do that generate wealth and can come from capital that is from people who get a benefit long term from it. Okay, let's take the Niger Bridge. A good part of money of Niger Bridge, Nigerians haven't been told the whole truth. It's come from the Abacha loot. Okay, the U.S. government even appointed consultants to superintend that construction so that Abacha loot is not badly spent. We know this. It's not money that was generated from what the government is doing. Second, into this world, infrastructure, look at how China created infrastructure. A boom, blasting infrastructure can be done without even recourse to your budget. Turning to budgets for infrastructure of significant long-term nature is not the smartest way to provide infrastructure. Yes, and if you go to Melbourne in Australia, the G20 infrastructure hub is there, and they give advice on how you can accelerate infrastructure without going into weak budgets like we have. I have been at the G20 infrastructure hub in Melbourne. They have tried to offer advice to Nigeria infrastructure regulatory, whatever, the agency. And they are puzzled that Nigeria does not want to listen to advice that can help them create infrastructure. So I think that we need to put Nigeria first.
So let's cut a spade right now, because on this program I like for us to hit the nail on the head. Who would you blame for that?
Laziness.
No, who would you blame? And I'm not saying what would you blame?
Leadership.
At the center or at the
everywhere.
State level?
I mean, the center is fantastic. When you compare them to the states, my goodness, the damage has been done to this country by dysfunctional state governments. Are you kidding me? Most of the harm has been done there. You talk about eggheads. I don't know whether it's the eggheads or the heads on the egg or whatever. But at least they do some thinking at the center. In the states, the governor just wakes up and no thinking at all. And that is where the people are. That's where they are.
If you
afford to have these kinds of people.
There are people who will be asking me right now on this program, because I know my viewers are very critical. They will say, what if Professor Utomi had the opportunity? What would you do differently?
Actually, when we start talking about it, we've talked about a simple thing. First of all, you have to bring the momentum to a halt. Government is too bloated in Nigeria. Government too bloated. We're spending all this money on recurrent expenditure. What's the result that's coming from it?
If you become president, would you be sacking people? Because how do you cut current?
It's much more than sacking people.
What would you do?
The more of the money is spent in just travel. Look, when General Buhari went to Onga, do you know how many civil servants left this city? Do you know how many of them? Do you know what you could do to this economy by just the spend of this government on attending one useless conference in New York? Do you know how much it costs Nigeria? These are the problems of this economy. It's a recurrent expenditure gone wild economy, because people are looking for what they can get, whether it is Esther code or this or that. They're not thinking, how can we build for our children? Which is what the issue really is. Look, economies that grow, a generation takes the pain for the gain of the next generation. We have chosen to use up our children's future in the way that we run government in Nigeria. This must stop. It must change.
Prof, I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist, an incurable.
I'm a double optimist. Double incurable.
I know you have been in a wilderness of optimism. But on a final note, Prof.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What is the solution? If there is one solution.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to say Peter Obi is the solution.
No, I'm not even going to go into all of that.
What is the practical solution?
Here's the solution, actually. Now you put it in my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
You put it in my mouth. Here's the solution. But let me tell you something. Let me tell you a story. I was at INSEAD in 1993. INSEAD is the European School of Business Administration in Fontainebleau in France. There was an American professor called Ingo Walter, a famous global finance professor, who was giving a class. And he showed how Nigeria's exchange rate was going. It was so funny, everybody started laughing in the class. And he said, look, you know, that country, I went there once in my life. I flew Air Nigeria, so-called Nigeria Airways, from New York to Lagos. Long story, so I don't have the time for it. But anyway, I got there. As the plane was landing, it was still taxiing. People started getting up. I wondered, was the plane on fire? Oh, they were taking their luggage. The thing moved, stopped, opened it. Everybody came out and started running. C2 started running. He got to the place, there was cubicle to pass in your passport. People were throwing the thing from the top instead of the cubicle. The thing was so completely dysfunctional. Then people came and met him. I said, your yellow card, long story, you know, funny story. Everybody just kept laughing. And these were CEOs of major companies around the world in that class. It was an AMP class in INSEAD. And But after the class, when Ingo once realized I was Nigerian, he came to apologize. I said, no. I mean, it's just real experience. That was your experience. He was coming to Nigeria for the first time. He was coming to the University of Lagos to help them out. And when he said to the people who were to take bribe from him, just to push his passport, what's the problem? What are you people doing? He said to them, this country, I had a roommate who was Nigerian. He was so bright, I couldn't hold a candle up to him. When this opportunity came to come to the University of Lagos to help set their curriculum or whatever it is, nobody wanted to. But because of my excitement at that relationship with this Nigerian who was my roommate, who was 10 times smarter than me, I volunteered to come. He said, what you people are doing, he's talking to those port officials, what you're doing to your country is so terrible because your country will continue to fall and fall and fall. But he ended it in a very interesting way. He said it will fall to a point where there's no further to fall. He said when they look each other in the face and say, God, what have you been doing to ourselves? That country will come up like this. Because some of the smartest people I've met in my life are Nigerians. Ingo Walter, famous professor of finance, 1993. So I don't know whether we've reached that bottom.
I think we have.
I hope so.
I mean, I pray we'll not get any lower than this. There are examples of where we don't want to be. Venezuela is one example.
Perhaps, but that's the model we are very closely associated
perhaps
with.
Perhaps the richest in terms of natural resource that you can think of in the world.
Absolutely.
But inflation in that country is out of the roof. That we do not want to be. We do not want to be like India too.
They want to be Somalia.
That has Somalia.
Yeah.
Or even there are examples of where we don't want to be. Yes. But there are examples of where we can also be.
Absolutely.
And that we need to dream
And it can happen very fast.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Utomi. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Great pleasure to talk with you.
Always times for political economics. Each time I invite you. Thank you so much indeed. It's good to see you. Happy New Year, by the way.
Same to you. Same to you.
Thank you so much. Elections are here, Prof. And I know you're thinking about your candidate, Peter Obi. I wish you and your candidate the very best. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. I wish Nigeria the very best. That's what matters. Yes. Nigeria needs to get governed.
Well, we'll take a breather, and when we come back, my very good friend Femi Adesina, the spokesperson of President Muhammadu Buhari, will be talking to us. I saw some frustration in the documentary that was aired the other day. We'll be explaining some of those things to us, the state of the nation. The government says they will stop subsidy in June. How much have we spent on subsidy anyways? If you're getting some explanation, it's the final lap of the Buhari government administration. So with us, we'll be right back, everyone. Let's move on now and get the conversation going. You heard from Professor Utomi. I'm now being joined by the senior advisor to the President, Muhammadu Buhari, Mr. Femi Adesina. Thank you so much indeed for coming. Happy New Year.
Thank you, same to you.
It seems you're taking after your principal by wearing white. It seems white is the new. Although things are not really looking white, considering that white meaning peaceful, because considering those who are on the street looking for fuel. And it's ironic, isn't it, that this government is still talking about subsidy 7.5 years down the line, isn't it?
Well, it's a phase the country must pass through and has passed through. And that phase is coming to an end. You have heard the government say, you have heard the Minister of Finance reiterate that subsidy payment will stop by June. And of course, that date was not just picked haphazardly. That month was not just picked from the blues. It had been planned. When the PIA kicked in, there was an 18-month window also opened for subsidy removal. And that will come by June this year. It's the way Nigeria must go. I have not seen any of the major contenders for presidency that has said he will retain fuel subsidy. It's the way Nigeria must go.
I mean, it does look to me that fuel subsidy is like a devil in the mix. And how, I mean, the question I ask is how it has come to stay for 7.5 years in the life of this government. And in the first place, it will stay for 8 years. This government will not remove it. This government leaves in May. It will go in June.
Yes.
That means for 8 years of this government, subsidy existed.
Yes, because you need to balance between economic sense and social sense. Removing fuel subsidy makes a lot of economic sense, but does it make all the social sense? And you know that President Buhari is somebody that looks at the social sense of whatever he will do. That's why he has not beaten the bullet on removal of fuel subsidy over the years.
So anybody that is thinking of removing it is not probably thinking of the social sense.
No, the time has just come.
For it to go.
Yes, the time has come for
I mean, what then happens? Because the president does not think subsidy was right before he got into office.
Yes, yes. In the beginning, his position was that what was subsidy really? But over the years, it became evident that the country was bleeding, the economy was bleeding, there was a lot of hemorrhage which needed to be stopped. And the time came. And that time is now.
You realize that subsidy may be fraudulent.
Well, that was the argument. I remember that Professor Tam David West, God rest his soul, who was a former oil minister, used to say that there was nothing called subsidy. The president also many times challenged the people, educate me, what is subsidy? And he was an oil minister before too. But then, over time, it became evident that the country was hemorrhaging and something needed to be done.
Let me, in fact, quote your principal, the president, when he said, I do not understand the Nigerian economics who over the issue of subsidy. He asked the question, who is subsidizing who?
Exactly.
He went further to say, if anyone is saying is subsidizing, is a fraud. That is what the president said pre-2015.
Yes, that was the position. And like I told you, even Professor Tam David West, who was a former oil minister, also held that same position.
Was it that the president didn't know enough before
no,
he was
an oil minister.
So that's the question.
He was an oil minister, so he knows enough.
So let me
but then things had mutated over the years between the time he was an oil minister, between the time Professor David West was oil minister, and now. Now it has become very evident.
If the president, who was a former minister of petroleum, and who is still the minister of petroleum, and perhaps the longest serving minister of petroleum in the history of this country, said at some point that free subsidy is a fraud, can one say that that fraud has existed and stay sort of a corruption that this government has been unable to fight?
Well, the truth that nobody can deny is that that fraud has stayed for so long.
Why is it difficult for a government that says it wants to fight?
Yes, I told you, economic sense and social sense.
Does it make sense to Nigerians, though?
Oh, yes. Yes. Economic sense and social sense. You know that each time there is an effort to fight the fraud in the subsidy regime, you have to contend with labor. You have to contend with the people.
Even when it is fraudulent.
That's it. That's the social sense of it.
The point I'm making, Mr. Adesina, I don't know if you are saying it, and I'm asking, these are the words of President Buhari before he got into office. He says, it is fraudulent.
Not even, and you are quoting pre-2015 there.
I remember, he has been a minister of petroleum.
I remember an interview he granted in London in 2016. He said the same thing, that he believed it was all fraud. And he is still right, even now.
It's still fraudulent.
Oh, yes,
so you're buttressing my point, Mr. Adesina. The point I'm making is that if you say, Mr. Adesina, that you have a rat in this room right now, and you are a master of killing rats, and 7.5 years you are not able to kill the rat, does it put a question mark on your ability to get the job done?
Permit my language. It is said that when a fly perches on a very sensitive part of your body, and you want to take a sledgehammer to kill that rat, you have to be careful. The fly may go away, and you end up crushing that sensitive part of your body. So the government needed to weigh its options very
politically,
carefully.
the government could not remove it?
It was the social consequences of it that the president was mindful of.
It takes me to the question of if subsidy is ongoing and yet there are a few queues on the roads, not of some, I mean, in Bayelsa, in some part of Delta, in part of the north, in Kano, and in some other, fuel is selling almost double the price of the pump price. That is official pump price. You see a lot of queues in Abuja and in Lagos causing unending traffic logjam. So if the subsidy is still ongoing and yet we are seeing this, doesn't make sense.
That is why the entire country has come to the realization that that regime, that regimen must change. It must change.
Does it resonate with what Prof said about the handling of the economy under the Buhari government?
No, I wouldn't want to weigh in on that at all, because one thing I've observed about economists is that they go in different directions.
He said they are bad managers of the economy under this government.
That's his opinion. He has a right to it. But economists always go
What is the opinion? I watched the
directions.
documentary of President Buhari. It does look like, for those who have said good things about him, even him as a president seems to have uttered some words of frustration about how much of love and passion he has for this country, but the result perhaps have not been commensurate to the performance.
No, not exactly, because you wouldn't expect the president to start praising himself. There's a saying that when people praise you, it sounds sweet, but when you praise yourself, it stinks. So President Buhari should not
So,
start
but the question
praising
I'm
himself.
asking, and perhaps trying to link them up, is the fact that when you say you are going to remove subsidy is fraudulent, you kept it for 8 years, you said you're going to fix the economy, the economist that left said that there's been a failure, colossal failure under this government. You said you're going to fight corruption, and I've asked you a few questions on corruption now. You said it's difficult to do that. How then would you rate, if you are being unable to do all of these things, based on what your critics are saying and what is evident to Nigerians, how then would you rate yourself as a government?
Well, you know I'm a part of this government.
That's what I'm asking.
I then shouldn't be doing the rating. It's like an incestuous relationship. I shouldn't be doing the rating. Outsiders should do the rating.
Would you say that your government has done well?
It's the same question I've answered that you have asked in another way.
Yeah, because you have not answered it quite well. So because at some point, you should, if you leave the exam hall, you should be able to say to yourself, you did well, even if the result doesn't come out well.
I'm repeating that other people should judge the government, should judge the administration.
So for those who criticize that this government has been a failure, what do you say to them?
They have a right to their opinion.
No, those are some of your typical answers. Find another one tonight. What would you say?
That typical answer remains true now, tomorrow, and forever. It remains true that people will always have a right to their opinion.
So the opinion that this government is a failure,
it does not make that opinion right.
Would you say that all of those things that your government wanted to achieve has been able to?
No government achieves all that it wants to achieve. I've never seen that government in the world.
You say you're going to fight corruption?
Even President Biden recently admitted that not everything they wanted to achieve have been achieved. So,
let's look at the 3 points that you said you want, things you want. Corruption.
No, the order is, we call it S-E-A, security, economy, anti-corruption.
Security.
So, security.
From 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in security?
No. That, I think it's a simplistic way to look at it. The thing is that, where were we in 2015 when this government came? Where are we today? It's better that way. In 2015, you and I, every Nigerian was running helter-skelter because insecurity, particularly insurgency, was at the very door of every state, of every city. Is it the same today? No, it has been beaten back a lot. There is a huge difference between where we were in 2015 and where we are today. Ask people in the hotbed areas of insecurity, particularly insurgency, in Borno, in Yobe, in Adamawa. Ask them, they will tell you that there is a huge difference between 2015 and now. That's security. Then, economy. For going to 60 years, Nigeria had paid lip service to diversifying the economy. It never got done. But as we speak, Nigerian economy is diversified.
How?
It's diversified.
How?
Look at our GDP. Oil that used to account for 70, 80% of GDP accounts for less than 10% now.
But what,
other things like agriculture, like services, like ICT, contribute more to the GDP than even oil. It shows you that the Nigerian economy
what are
is
we
diversified.
to show for it, even if it's diversified?
It's a beginning. It's a beginning. The important thing is that the Nigerian economy is not mono again. We used to have a mono economy that was only dependent on oil.
Let me ask you this question, Mr. Adesina. And because you are on this side some years back, sitting on that other side might be difficult. Taking a leave from taking a leave from journalism.
It just gives me a wider perspective. And I tell you, in some months now, I'll be on what you call that side again.
But now that you are on that side, I know that you're a very fine journalist when you were on this side. But truthfully, what legacy would you say your principal, Muhammadu Buhari, if there is one legacy legacy that he is going to be leaving behind, what would that be?
One, he met a country that was in tatters, that you weren't sure would still be together in 1 week, in 1 month, in 2 months. Today, he has held the country together. And the semblance of security that you have can't be compared to what subsisted in 2015. It kept Nigeria together. And things are looking up, things are getting better.
When someone like President Obasanjo said, we are moving from frying pan to fire.
Well, President Obasanjo has the right to his opinion. We know his opinion. We respect him as a person, but we don't agree.
Even when he rendered his opinion for the president becoming president in 2015 against the sitting president at the time.
Yes.
His opinion was his opinion, and it helped because of your principle at that time.
It served its interest there. But later, in the course of the administration, maybe some interests he had were not realized. And he moved to another side. Remember that he was against the president coming back in 2019. The president won with a wider margin in 2019 than 2019.
Do you think there's something that the president could have done that he's not been able to achieve?
It will always happen in every sphere of life.
For example, in areas of appointments, his critics have said it was nepotistic. In areas of uniting Nigeria.
That is what will always subsist in this country. There will always be talk of nepotism in this country. But one thing I can assure you about President Buhari is that what the Constitution requires in terms of federal character, the president is very scrupulous about it. If the Constitution provides that every geopolitical zone must be represented in these appointments, he's very finicky about it. If the Constitution says there must be a minister from each state in the country, he's finicky about it. But there are some other appointments that are subject to presidential prerogative. Then he can do those ones.
Did you ever regret taking this job?
No. I came to serve a man I had admired since he was a military leader in 1980.
So this was a dream job for you?
Yes, I had always said it before I came into government that I'm not a government person. I will never serve any government in Nigeria except the one headed by Muhammadu Buhari. So when he came in and I was invited to serve, I was happy.
And you will never do that again?
No. I mean, not in this capacity. Not in this kind of assignment I've done. You do it once in a lifetime.
Special advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari. Thank you indeed for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
But that's our very show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm sure Okimale. God bless Nigeria.